Thank you for joining us on this lovely Wednesday as we explore our conversation about the empathetic leader and putting your emotional intelligence to work. My name is Kathleen Costello. I am on the leadership team for the Positive Psychology Coaching and Diversity Institute, lovingly known as PCADI. And I'm so happy to be joined today by Brad and Paula, two of my wonderful colleagues. So before we dive into this conversation, if you both would just like to introduce yourself for a minute. Brad, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. From a professional standpoint, the last 20 years, I worked for a top 5 bank. My training, I'm a certified public accountant by training. I spent the bulk of my career doing financial analysis. The last 10 years, I was very much into the technology side of the house. So that's my mixture of knowledge. I've been a coach for about 15 years. I probably got into it because frankly, I just loved it. It wasn't something that I thought would be something that was required at work. I actually didn't let people know I was doing it. I primarily initially did it for myself to be able to know techniques, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. So I've been doing that in various capacities since then.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Well, I hear you bring a lot of experience, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this topic today. And Paula, please introduce yourself.
Okay, well, I'm Paula Haluski, and I came from a very different background. I came from decades of behavioral health. So I was a therapist in a previous life, and I moved over to coaching because I felt like it really fit more my personality, my style. I've been coaching since 2016, focused on the here and now and the future, and practicing. And I'm really big into sports and sports psychology, so it just resonated with me. And I just it completely fulfills my purpose to help people achieve their goals, their objectives, and who they'd like to be. So that's why I'm here. And emotional intelligence is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both for sharing and sharing a little bit more about your background. And, it's interesting because this week we had a PCADI training, and actually we dove quite a bit into empathy because it is one of our principles and how it fits within emotional intelligence. And I agree with you. And especially when we're looking at leadership, these qualities, empathy and emotional intelligence, are so, so important. And so, as we start to dive into this, right, there's a lot of things that we can cover regarding empathy and emotional intelligence. I'm curious for both of you, what interested you in this topic? Yeah, either one of you can dive in. No.
Jump right in. Well, it's a little bit, being emotional intelligence, a lot of it, it's very akin to, ego functioning, right? So if you really look at them side by side, they're very similar. And being a therapist and, in that world and working in, helping people enhance their ego functioning, emotional intelligence is it's a natural output from that. And so it really, and plus, if you read the research and you work with your clients on it, you can see the impact that it has in their leadership capabilities, in their personal life, in their professional life. And so for me, it was just a natural draw to work in emotional intelligence.
I love that. And I love what you shared about the connection to, the ego development too, because I think part of it is that, empathy, we don't all have it naturally, right? Like it's not only sometimes a strength that some people have more naturally, but it's also a skill that can be developed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brad, how about you? What was of interest for you with this topic?
Well, one part of it was, and this may be surprising to people, certified public accountants and technology people aren't known for their ability to connect with people and be empathetic. So, I was around folks that weren't, and it started being an interest to me because one of the foundations of my career, I've always felt one of my values is helping to drive efficiency. And it really struck me how there is a direct correlation between being empathetic and being able to listen and being an authentic leader and actually having people be happier and be more productive. And so what I liked was both sides, which is I'm able to connect with people, which is just something I like to do. We all like to connect and have you're with people, 40, 50 hours a week and connect with them and have a good relationship. But there's also a very documented way that you can be able to increase the efficiency and happiness of your own employees. So it was really that ability to combine the two and be able to convince folks, there's a lot of folks who think, this isn't much. Being able to say, hey, no, this is really something that it will help you, but it will also help others and you very specifically professionally.
Thanks for sharing that, Brad. I agree. And what I appreciate you're bringing up is that kind of it's a little bit strategic to be empathetic, right? Like not as a way of in any way kind of being manipulative, but that actually I think it's the ability to bring our humanness to work at times and have it acknowledged, right? That we do have our professional life and our professional world and all of that that's required of us, but we also are human, that comes with emotions and feelings and family dynamics and all of these things. And like you said, we spend so much time at work. And so to feel like kind of a whole part of our being doesn't get recognized, right? I think leaves a lot out. And as you said, when coworkers can feel like both parts of them can be met, the professional and the personal, it can be a really powerful tool to increase work satisfaction and productivity, right? Because it's like we don't feel like we have to stuff part of ourselves away at work.
Yep.
Yeah.
I 100%. And Brad, you said the word authentic, earlier. So, being able to be our authentic selves, at work and have that be valued, have that be acknowledged, have that be recognized is so important because, I've spoken to people that felt like they had to kind of split, parts of themselves off because it just, they were too frightened to bring it up at work. So, being an empathic leader, is creating that foundation, that safety, that trust, that you can be your authentic self. And as a leader, being transparent yourself, and being vulnerable yourself. You're not expected to know all the answers. That's why you surround yourself with people that can help you, create and innovate and produce and all those types of things. But, if you have that foundation of a safe, trusting, empathic environment or empathic culture, when it comes to actually needing that, I consider that more of a pull leadership style where, you're being inspirational, you're, developing staff. But at some point, with sales and with product launches, there's a push. But if you have that foundation established, when you need to do a push, and all leaders will need to do a push, people understand the criticalness of the push because you already have the foundation laid of that safe, trusting, empathic culture.
Well said, Paul. And you read my mind. I was actually just going to say, what do you both see as some of the qualities of an empathic leader? And you described some of them. I think safety is a big one that you mentioned. Brad, does anything come to mind, in your experience of what qualities resonate?
Yeah, no, there's one I've always felt is really paramount is, what's called active listening. That, 9 times out of 10 at work, you are having a conversation with someone and, you're talking to them, but at the same time, there's a little voice in the back of your head, you're preparing your answer and you're taking it and you're not even conscious about it because it's the natural way you are. And what happens is you start to miss and you start trying to get your point across as opposed to listening. And so the biggest one, at least personally for me, and what I've seen is being able to move from that, what I call level 1 of listening to level 2, where I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm not trying to prepare. I'm looking at you. I'm seeing your body language. I'm trying to really understand you. I'm reflecting back. So I don't have an answer at the end, but I can say things such as, let me just, play back to you what I think I'm hearing. And so if you do the act of listening, you're going to build that trust. You're going to build that bit where people say, you care about me. The other ones are, and these are related, I think, but being open-minded. I know, yeah, I know me personally, and there's a lot of personality tests that kind of test this, is how do you become under stress? And I know for me personally, one of the descriptions was, as I am stressed, any ideas bounce off. I don't want to hear them. I am going to go on mine. I'm under stress and I'm going to do it. One of the other ones is just being able to recognize it. I always say you have to forgive yourself on this stuff because you're going to mess up all the time. But being able to recognize yourself and say, I'm cutting off thoughts, and I need to make sure that I'm going ahead and being open-minded, because that path you have, if you've been under pressure, especially, is going to be hard to do. And just the general one, being supportive and understanding things of that nature. There's a lot of techniques about that, but I would say the two ones that I have found that are really critical are just really, really, really listening, and then being open-minded and caring about the thing.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Brad. And I want to acknowledge, like, what you're describing with the active listening, that there can be a vulnerability in that, right? Because I think part of the wanting to have something prepared to say or feeling like we need to is, and I think especially for leaders, like, who feel like they have to be the one to have the answers or the solution or and so there can be a vulnerability in just creating that open space of listening and understanding and maybe not having an answer.
Right.
And I think that can sometimes be where it can be a little scary to be empathic, because it's the world of emotions,
Right.
and emotions don't always have a solution. They don't always have a clear reasoning. But to what you said is, like, that ability to just understand and, like, be with, right? Like, that's when I think about empathy, it's like the, being with someone in their experience, right? Understanding it to feel like you can feel what they feel in their shoes, but it doesn't mean we have to solve it. Right. And I think that's what you're describing too, is the power of just being there and providing space and understanding can be healing in and of itself.
Yeah. And I think both Paula and you, Kathleen, kind of mentioned this, but you have to feel comfortable to say, I don't know, folks. I don't know. We're working on something. I wish I could give you a total answer. I wish I could but I don't. And I really need you to help me. That, we're not taught that as leaders. You're taught to be, I have to have an answer. And if I don't, all chaos will happen. And it takes a while to learn, like, no, it's not chaos. People want to help. And if you invite them in and say, I don't know, guys, you guys are the ones that do it. What do you think? You can, I think, Paula, you were talking about, you can build that trust tremendously, but you're right. You have to feel comfortable being vulnerable. You have to be comfortable saying
Absolutely.
that. So that's tough.
But I think, as I'm active listening to you guys, I love that you brought that up. It's, kind of like pulling it together. Yes, it has to be involved. Like, emotions are not something that you solve. Emotions are just something that are, right? So and I think we are taught to go in and, like, problem solve. Like, let's solve this problem. Oh, you're feeling sad. Let's solve that problem.
Right.
But I love what you said about the active listening, and Kathleen, what you said about just being with. And that's hard, because that, opens a door for to get in touch with your own emotions. And, like, for the longest time, emotions were like, there wasn't a place for them. But when you cut yourself off from the emotions, as we all know, it kind of ties your hand behind your back. And the act of listening and being present. And, I want to take that one step further, Brad, in terms of, like, if you're really actively listening, you'll start to know what questions to ask.
Right.
To really, really delve into, and this is not only personal, into your into the emotions, but just think about how innovation happens. With all these people sitting around the table, actively listening to each other, just and then asking the right questions to take the process further.
Right.
So, but you need to be, as Kathleen said, you need to be vulnerable for that. You're not gonna, and Brad, you're not gonna have all the answers.
Right.
That's sort of the beauty of it. That's sort of where creation and innovation happens if you allow yourself to be in that space.
Yep. And it's interesting. In my last, 10 years I spent in technology, and there's a delivery methodology called Agile. I don't know if folks have heard about it, but it's a way you deliver tech efforts. But one of the things is that it kind of upends a traditional leadership style in that it's everything about the teams. The teams are the ones who are together. The teams are the ones who have the answers. And often folks wonder, well, what does a leader do? And a leader, and I think we've all heard of also servant leadership, which I think is a lot of emotional intelligence. There's some things that examples of. One example is something called a Gemba walk. You get out of your office and you walk around to the various teams and you meet them and you talk to them and you find out what are obstacles I can get out of your way. How is the team feeling? The team does retrospectives all the time to see how did things go? How did people feel about those things? And what you as a leader are supposed to do is to listen. You can attend meetings, for example, but you're not supposed to talk. You just observe. And so there's a whole aspect of that people don't realize. And, you do all of that. And then you as a leader, you take that back, you compare that to your values. And one of the things I think is key to emotional intelligence is knowing your own values. And then, then you come up with a way to try to lead overall. But again, as long as people feel they've been listened to, and they may not agree with it, but as long as I feel listened to, I feel respected, I have trust, you'll say, okay, I get it. I've made my opinion known, and I can go ahead and do it. And that's an example to me of an actual real life example in work of what a role should be as a leader.
That's really interesting, Brad. And I appreciate that because you're kind of echoing what Paula said in that it's like the leader can kind of get out of the way of the creative process, right? Like they're not directing it. They're just being with and picking up the information, trying to see where they can remove obstacles to the creative process.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And also how liberating, like me, how liberating for a leader that you don't have to have it all figured out. Like you're probably not going to, right? That's the power of teams, right? Even this conversation is so much more meaningful because the three of us are having it together compared to one of us just, not to say it wouldn't be still a great, great presentation of 30 minutes of one person, but being able to bounce ideas off of each other and share our experience, this makes things so much richer. And so I feel like we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but we talked a little bit about the power of vulnerability and what an empathetic leader looks like. And then I think part of that brings up, like, can you still be a strong leader and an empathetic leader, right? Because I think sometimes the idea of vulnerability for some can be equated with weakness, right? So in your minds, I kind of feel like I know the answer, but I'm curious to hear, do you feel like you can be an empathetic leader and a strong leader at the same time?
I'll jump in. Yeah. I mean, sure. Obviously, the answer is yes, but I would actually take it almost another way. Is like, you're not going to be a strong leader unless you do. Now you can.
Brad.
Yeah, you're going to say that. I mean, the sheer force of will, I'll be honest, there's plenty of leaders who are successful who do things through the sheer pushing of things. They can. You can do that. It's not as if you don't, you're not going to be, quote, successful in the sense of I get promoted and things like that. But if you want to be more productive and deliver more and to be able to have people want to be on your team, which will make you even more productive, you have to be emotionally intelligent, or you're going to have a very high turnover, unhappy group of people. So I don't think you can be one without it. Or the second thing is you will be, I think, much more successful as a person, and also in your job if you combine the two.
I couldn't agree more, Brett. I really appreciate what you said, and I also think about the vulnerability part, being a weakness. But if you really, really think about it, and you sit with that for a moment about being vulnerable in front of other people, just think about how courageous that is.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a strong leader and you want to demonstrate courage, being vulnerable is extremely courageous.
Yeah.
And by, the act of being vulnerable in and of itself increases the trust and the safety on the team. Because let me tell you something, people know your vulnerabilities whether you want them to or not.
Right.
And then not owning them and admitting to them, then people are going to be concerned about that. And they're not going to show their own. But it's when you put that all on the table that, somebody else can come in and,
Yep.
offer some creativity around that. Right. I do think that in the past, it was like leaders know all and, and push, 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 push. And now it's like leaders can't possibly know all. I mean, why? A leader is someone that can take a talented team of people and, help everybody on that team rise and work together to create something. But, each member of the team is going to have, right, their own strengths, their own knowledge, their own ideas. And the more of those that get placed on the table, the better the product is going to be, the better the solution is going to be, because more minds being encouraged and allowed to work on it.
Yep.
I mean, it's just
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, one of the things I saw in tech over the past 10 or 15 years is the pace of change is accelerating tremendously. Things are coming at you faster and faster. People need things quicker. Competition in the world is getting very quick. I used to crack me up how you've learned a programming language, and then 2 years later you got to learn a whole new programming language because everything's happening. So you had to have a strong learning agility. You can't at that point be command and control, because things are coming so fast and things are changing. I'm gonna have to rely on guys. How do we fix this? And I haven't learned the latest Java, or I haven't learned this. I'm going to need to rely on you to do it. Whereas in the past, you didn't, because technology wasn't changing so fast. So I agree with you, Paul. You almost have to be more of an empathic leader, simply because the way everything's changing so quickly, and the pace of change.
Right. I think that that's a really, really important point, Brad, is that the pace at which we are working under these days is very different, especially in tech, but lots of other product development as well. Lots of competition out there. But to create that environment where people are willing and able to put their ideas on the table to innovate the best way possible is so important. And we're only going to do that in a safe and trusting environment. Right. And not with a leader saying, what a dumb idea. That's just, you do what I'm saying? But I really appreciate you bringing in that sort of the pace that we are at today.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
Yep.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing too is that, you can be an empathetic leader and still be assertive, right? Can still drive change.
Absolutely.
You can still you can still have expectations. You can still, have, you can still have high expectations of your team. It's just that actually, kind of from what you were describing, Brad, by bringing in more of the empathy and the emotional intelligence, you might actually be able to get more from your team members because they feel met in these different ways. They feel more connected. They feel more able to communicate openly. And what a powerful environment that is. I'm gonna just go off on a little bit of a tangent that you mentioned the fast-paced nature in tech. And I think, Paula, you highlighted that really that's becoming the norm kind of across the board, right? Like the speed of which we're working, and because of technology and how much more available we are in all of these different ways, our workplace, I would say it's always been stressful, but I would say it's even more
Yeah.
stressful in some ways. And I think that this brings in kind of like, how do we support that empathy? Because I think it does take a little bit of slowing down, right? That you mentioned, Brad, at the beginning, kind of when we get stressed, we just kind of get into this, I'm going to say kind of this hamster wheel, like, oh, I need to get things done, things
Yep.
need to, and it's like, I don't have time to deal with people's stuff, right?
Right.
But kind of what we're describing is why it's actually important to be present sometimes with people's stuff, because of what that can generate within the team. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on like some strategies or some ways that we can help support our leaders and folks in the workplace to be able to still cultivate emotional intelligence even in these kind of fast-paced, demanding environments.
That's a wonderful question.
Yeah. One thing you could do is to do things that bring this up. I think, Paula, you said everybody knows what you are, but I think being able to, for example, I think everybody's very familiar with strengths exercises. You take a test and you get strengths and opportunities. There's other personality tests you can do. And what I have found is if you just have that, it allows a very easy way to say, well, Geraldine over there, we all know that she, something, and you can make it almost a joke, and kind of kid around, and it creates I think I know this person a little better. And it's that productivity part. If I feel a part of it, I feel like I know my team. I feel I can be vulnerable to them. Being able to understand that somebody's situation, we're seeing a lot of now of, hey, you got to go back 3 days a week. We don't care that you're more productive at home. We don't care about that. And that's the exact opposite of it. A decision's being made because people believe that, and they just want that. There's a lot of folks who have, they've set up their whole lives around it, daycare, things of that nature, and being able to listen to them, and being as accommodative as possible, and being able to really to know them, know their values, and know their strengths, and know their opportunities. So what I would say is take some time out to do those exercises as a group, understand each other, get to know each other a little bit. It creates a sense of togetherness, but it can also help with stress, because we all know we're going under it. We're all having a shared experience of stress, maybe not the drivers of stress, but we're able to talk about those more. So that's one thing I would suggest, is just trying to make yourselves be aware of both your strengths, opportunities about it, and your values. Values are big, and there's some very simple value exercises that you can do.
There, I want to add to that, because I've, leaders, when you have that one-on-one time, and I would strongly suggest that people do have the one-on-one time, whether it's every other week or once a month with, members of your staff, treat that as sacred time.
Yeah.
Really treat that as sacred time, and, the act of listening and getting to know them, working on professional development, working on their strengths, working on their growth areas, but to treat that time as sacred, because I've often heard leaders are, canceling those kind of appointments, and it leaves, it leaves the person feeling devalued. It leaves the person feeling they're not important. And so just those, those types of things are so important to create the environment that you're valued, you're important. I want to hear from you. I believe in you. So that's another way that I would strongly recommend people and leaders do, is to treat that time as sacred and do exactly what Brad's talking about, the act of listening, the strength finders, all those kind of things. And getting to know them as a person. Like you said, Kathleen, like, what about their kids? What about their families? I have an example of that I want I know we're out of time, but there was a leader, and one of his employees went silent, which was very unusual for her. Very unusual for her. And this was an empathic leader. So instead of being like, what's wrong? He went and brought her into the office and said, "You're silent. What has happened?" And she told him, "Oh, I'm going to cry." She told him that her brother died, and that she was from Europe, and she couldn't afford to go to Europe for the funeral.
Yeah.
So, sorry, he scooped her up, put her on a plane at the company's expense. And that that act alone was more important than any bonus anybody ever received that year, because of his noticing she went silent and then helping her get home.
That is, to me, so critical, both on the emotional side, but making her understand that there's not going to be a penalty here for you. You can say, "I just can't do this right now, and here's why," and you can do that. There's there's a lot of examples of this just from a business standpoint. One of the concepts of the Toyota production is that anybody at any time can pull a cord and say, "We have to stop the line." I mean, they're seeing a defect or it's going too fast, and they can go ahead and do that. And one of the concepts of Agile is, if everybody says, "Here's how much work they do," anybody can raise their hand and say, I don't think we can do it. And then you have that discussion and you talk about why that is. And it's that bit. I mean, that was a fantastic example of somebody who's massively emotionally intelligent. It was confused everywhere of, "Oh my gosh, you're going through this. I want to understand it." That example, or "I don't think I can do this. I'm raising my hand. I don't think we as a team can do this." And sitting down with folks and saying, "Okay, great. There's not a penalty here. It's a safe environment.
Right.
Nothing bad is going to happen to you." And that is something that is hard to get across. You have to build that over time. What I always tell people, though, is you build it over time, but you can destroy it very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. If they had a great connection, before this, fantastic. I bring you in, what's going on? And you say this, and you say, "Well, that's hard. So, well, it's time to get back to work." I mean, that would have blown that entirely. So you have to be nurturing it, letting people know there's not a penalty, and really just listening to them and understanding where they are.
That's the safety.
Yep.
That's building the safety, and understand that people will make mistakes, understand that people will fail, but it is truly a growth opportunity. And that's part of the pole leadership. Truly is, hey, let's learn from this. We need to take risks in order to move forward. But let's make it a calculated risk. But exactly. But that's the environment, is that safety, that trust, and that's going to propel businesses forward for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Paula, for sharing that. It was such a beautiful story to sort of encapsulate what we're describing, right? And listen, leaders, not everybody might have that ability to put somebody on a plane. And I mean, I think that was just such a profound example to, Brad, what you're describing is like, but what I think our leaders can do is meet people where they are and be willing to have a conversation. And I think the two big takeaways I had about the strategies you both recommended is, even when things get busy, when things get tough, still prioritize team building, still prioritize understanding each other, and still prioritize that one-on-one time. Because like what Paula, you described in that story, if that leader hadn't made that time, he would not have known what was happening with his employee. And who knows what stories would have come up about her productivity, her affect, her whatever.
Exactly.
So thank you both. This was such a powerful conversation. And I really hope for those of you who are tuning in now or who watch this later, I hope that you could really glean some helpful information about the importance of empathy and emotional intelligence in the workplace. At PCADI, we are here to help support you in building emotional intelligence as leaders or within your organization. And, you know, as Paula and Brad have shown, we have amazing coaches who are here to help support, you know, busy professionals in trying to grow and expand in all of these areas that we've described. So thank you both again, Brad and Paula. I really enjoyed this conversation. And until next time, everyone. We'll see
Bye.
you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.